And welcome to a Rototanks review. I am your host, Luca Fulf. Yeah, if I can even get my own bloody name right. And today I will be showing you the Russian Tier 9 medium, the T-54. Sitting opposite to, whoops, wrong button. Get it right. The Object 430, which I have not played at all. Going back to the T-54. It does have the HD model on it, looks quite nice, texturing's good. A quick way to tell on most tanks if it has the HD model, if you can zoom in far enough and look down the gun barrel, you typically see Wargaming has rifled the gun. I honestly don't know if the T-54 used a rifled cannon or not. I'd be more inclined to believe that they used a smoothbore, but I honestly don't know. Rugged, a little ugly, but it works. The design for this particular style of tank was to build a whole mess load of them as quickly and as cheaply as possible. The Russian army at the time had a philosophy of quantity over quality. And the idea behind that is to have more stuff than what your opponent can kill. It worked fairly well for them in World War II, though by the time this tank entered service and production, the tanks it would have been fighting against by the NATO powers kind of had more of the quality over quantity thing going for them. And these did actually fight NATO tanks, most famously the Centurions, driven by the Israeli tankers in the various Arab-Israeli wars, where these things were just getting chewed to pieces. Now, that's not especially to say that it's the fault of the tank and that the Centurion is just that much better. Part of it, I believe it would be more down to the people driving the tanks. If I remember right, both the Egyptians and the Seleucians, or Seleucids, I don't know, weren't as experienced in tank warfare as the Israeli tankers, who were taught by old World War II aces how to drive the tanks. They were taught by the British Army how to maintain the Centurions. They also fielded a few various other tanks, like one of the variants of the Patton. I'm getting a little sidetracked there. Needless to say, the T-54 did not perform as expected against the Western Allies. Though I am probably going to chalk that one up mostly to crew quality and training as compared to tank doctrine, philosophy, stuff like that. As for design philosophy, the Russians really just made these things to do one job, which was go forward, shoot the gun, and try and wreak as much havoc as they possibly could. design is very, very simple. You can see that they learned quite a lot in their design. Um, they started off, the sloped armor is still incorporated, and the T-54 is definitely has a very good frontal slope. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be spaced armor or that's just something else. Definitely looks like spaced armor to me. Don't know if that was a particular variant or what exactly that was for, no clue. The front plate has that signature German jigsaw incorporation of the armor. The German, going back to the historical side of things briefly, the Germans did pretty much incorporate the idea of spaced armor from the Russians after they started capturing T-34s and seeing how effective they were at deflecting shots off that armor. But they realized very, very quickly if you angle all the main surfaces of the tank, it does drastically impede the amount of space within the tank for various pieces of equipment and crew personnel, like your engines. Your turret size is heavily limited by that. Basically, it just ruins the capacity of the tank very, very much. To get around that, the Germans simply angled the fronts of their tanks, notably the Panthers and Tiger IIs, while back angling the end of it. And you can kind of see that same basic principle here, where it has a bit of a back slope to compensate for the front slope. Definitely not as noticeable as it would be on the Panthers and the Tiger IIs. And the T-54 definitely shows that. Taking back of an idea that they originated with and that had been improved. Basic tank philosophy is the front will always be facing towards the enemy as much as possible, so the extra sloping was deemed unnecessary. And it seems to be holding true over 60 years later. One thing that the Russians took from the American tank design, notably the Shermans, was cast turrets. And most of your late World War II and, well, not most of them, basically your post-World War II tanks, such as your Joseph Stalin 3s, T-54s, and stuff like that, featured cast turrets. Much easier to make than, say, a turret like the Tiger IIs, which uses all rolled armored steel, and to make a dome-like shape out of rolled steel being nearly impossible and extremely labor intensive, and it's just a royal mess. Whereas with the cast turrets, you just fill in the steel and you can make them as thick as you need to within the cast. Which brings me on to the actual in-game armor of the tank. The turret front 200 millimeters thick. That is 8 inches of armor for people that don't know a metric. 80 on the side and 45 on the rear. And for the most part, front and side is very, very well angled and sloped. is also very well rounded. Up top, bit of a different story, as you can kind of see weld lines where they added in the hatch ports and stuff. Bit of an additional feature to the main turret cast itself. The armor here is actually a bit weaker. I don't know the top turret armor off the top of my head, but high penetration guns that sit up higher than you can actually punch holes through the top of your turret. But most of the time people will just go for these hatches here, left and right commander, and I presume radio operator. Not entirely sure. Driver would be here, and you will lose your driver and your gunner a lot in these tanks. Not entirely sure where the gunner is. I'm going to go off the guess that he's probably sitting in front of whoever sits here. Might be the commander, judging from the periscopes. I honestly don't know. So, yeah. Frontal hull armor is not that spectacular. 120 millimeters thick. Reasonably well sloped, but don't expect much to bounce off your whole front. Your turret front is what's going to save you the most in this tank. Shots at your turret. This thing is a close quarters dogfighter of a tank. It loves the brawl. Side armor 80 millimeters thick and very, very, very flat. Side of your turret in this section back does get penetrated relatively easy. Turret ring, ammunition, all that right in here. So you will suffer a lot of ammo rack damage, damage to your turret ring, stuff like that. Same story on the other side. The Russians, of the time period this tank was out, had a habit of storing ammunition around the turret ring. So hits in the side of this thing do pose a high chance of blowing your ammo rack. Hull and turret on the back, garbage. Don't expect anything to bounce off the back of this thing unless it's extremely screwy angles. Now, the weight of the vehicle is quite low. With this setup, weighs 35.24 tons with a max load limit of just under 40 tons. Has a powerful 700 horsepower engine, which does get this thing up and moving quite nicely. And has a top speed limit of 56 kph. On average, you do about 48-50 kph on most terrain, with a pretty good traverse speed of 48 degrees per second. These two things combined with how fast the turret traverses, which is 44 degrees per second, all leads into this thing excelling at dogfighting or circle strafing. The gun I am using on my T-54 is the 100mm D54. I prefer to use it because it has the higher penetration, which is good for how I use it. It has an ulterior choice of the 100mm D10T2C, slightly less penetration, same rate of fire, a bit more accurate with a better aim time. So the gun you choose on the tank really does determine how you play it. With this gun, you can effectively snipe better with it. but its penetration lets it down. It's a bit of a difference between 18 millimeters of penetration, but just for the general way the tank handles, I feel that the higher penetration is more valuable to the tank than the better accuracy. As for crew setup, I went recon, snapshot, smooth ride, and safe stowage. Recon just to try and get the view range up, which is useful when you're out hunting for targets. Snapshot, which improves accuracy during turret rotation of movement. Which is smooth ride. I forget exactly what that does. Okay. Improves accuracy when firing on the move. Okay. All very, very useful. And safe stowage just to help keep your ammo rack safe. I have this thing set up primarily to be a brawling tank, which brings me to equipment. Vertical stabilizer, medium caliber tank gun rammer, ventilation. Hammer down the reload. Accuracy is not that important at super close range, and it will help with the crew's ability to get this thing going faster, get that traverse speed spot on both turret and hull. The view range on the T-54 is rather poor at 390 meters. Most things at the tiers it fights at have equal to or better than 390. It has a good 730 meter signal range. So, once again, don't have any gameplay footage for this tank. I will work on getting some eventually. But yeah, basically this thing is an up-close dogfighting tank. It's low to the ground, fast, and lethal. Oh yeah, gun stats. Oops. 7.32 rate of fire, which translates into a 7.86 second reload with just 100% crew, no rammers, vents, anything like that. I suspect you could probably hammer that down to about 6.5 seconds with the rammer, ventilation, and brothers in arms. The D-54, 219 pen, average damage 320. Kind of on the poor side of accuracy, 0.39, with a slow aim time of 2.9 seconds. Really not much to say about this tank other than the fact that if I remember correctly, this is the model that holds the world record for most tanks ever produced of a single model. I believe there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 65,000 of these Russian monsters produced. And here on World of Tanks, it's a good tier 9 medium. It's good at flanking, but its true home is parked on the side and around bigger, slower, heavier tanks, tank destroyers, artillery. This thing can just outmaneuver them all. The biggest problem this thing has is against other fast brawling medium tanks. So other T-54s, its tier 10 brethren, the 430, 140, and 62A will give this troubles. The Japanese mediums will give this thing all kinds of troubles as well. But for what it's worth, I'd have to say it's probably one of the best tier 9 mediums available. Anywho, this has been a tank review on the T-54, and I'm your host, been your host, Luca Fulf. See you next time.